Hi, I'm Mike, the two-lane traveler, bringing you another road trip in video. Today's trip is a bit shorter than usual. In fact, it's only about a mile down the road as we visit my hometown of Jonesborough, Tennessee. What makes Jonesborough so special? I'm going to share with you some of the most interesting places in our town of less than 7,000 people. We're steeped in history, but we're also world famous for something I'll tell you about a little later. We may be small, but we've been around a long, long time. Jonesborough is the oldest town in the entire state of Tennessee. In fact, it's older than the state itself. When the town was formed in 1779, it was still part of North Carolina. It wasn't until 17 years later, in 1796, that Tennessee split off from North Carolina and became the 16th state of the United States. In between, there was a kerfuffle known as the Lost State of Franklin, but that's a story for another day. Having been around for so long, there's a lot of history here. Famous people like Daniel Boone and David Crocket lived nearby and walked our streets. Andrew Jackson lived here and practiced law in Jonesborough briefly in 1788. So let's take a look at some of the history around here. The Chester Inn is the oldest commercial building in town. It was built in 1797 by Dr. William Chester to provide lodging for those traveling through the area on the Stage Road, which is now Main Street. The Chester Inn was also known over time as the Bell Tavern, the Union Hotel, the Planter's House, and the Jonesborough Inn. In the late 1940s, the hotel was even converted to apartments for a period of time. The state of Tennessee purchased the site in 1989 and restored it to the way it looked in the 1880s and 1890s. The restored building is now a state-owned historical site with a museum telling the history of Jonesborough from 1779 to the present. The museum is currently open every day but Tuesday. In January and February, it's open by appointment only. I'd strongly encourage you to call ahead of time to confirm the hours before you go. Finally, in addition to being part of the Jonesborough Historic District, it's also individually listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Christopher Taylor House is the oldest structure in downtown Jonesborough, moved here in 1974 from a mile or two away on the Stage Road. It was built in the 1770s by Christopher Taylor. This was the house where Andrew Jackson briefly lived in 1788 while he practiced law in Jonesborough. The Eureka Inn was also built in 1797, but as a private residence. It was enlarged and converted into a hotel in the late 1800s. It was later called the Russell Hotel and the Gresham Hotel. It's since been restored to its 1900 look and is called the Eureka Inn. It's open for business today. This is one of the oldest brick structures in Jonesborough, having been built in 1820 by Samuel D. Jackson. Local lore says that each of his 3 daughters lived in one of the 3 units, and the building has been long referred to as Sisters Row. The Green Mansion was built sometime around 1815 to 1825 by John Green, a farmer and real estate agent. The home has had limited alterations since it was first built, so it looks much the same as it originally did. The Mansion House was built in 1843 by Jonesborough's first postmaster, John W. Simpson. It became one of the first hotels in town, known as the John Simpson Hotel. Built in the 1840s, the Salt House has served many purposes over the years. Salt was rationed to citizens during the Civil War from this location, giving it its name. It's now the Tennessee Hills Distillery, and it's open to the public. The well-recognized and beautiful courthouse, built in 1913, is located on the same spot as the original 1779 courthouse. In fact, at least 5 previous courthouses were built on this site between 1779 and 1845. Here are several more places built in the 1700s and 1800s. Jonesborough, like many places around the country, has an interesting and complicated historical relationship with race. You might be surprised to know that the very first periodical dedicated exclusively to the abolition of slavery in the United States was written and published here. Elihu Embry began circulation of the Emancipator on April 30th, 1820 from the town of Jonesborough. Cemeteries were segregated by race, with deceased white people being buried in most of the old Jonesborough Cemetery, created in 1803, and deceased black people being buried along the eastern strip of the same cemetery. This can be seen along the western side of what is now Cemetery Lane. All of these several dozen black graves are unmarked. Later, in 1896, a cemetery was established by the Colored People's Cemetery Society. It's located right next door in what was then known as College Hill Cemetery and is now known as Evergreen Cemetery. The Warner Institute was created in 1876 by Yardley Warner, a member of the Society of Friends, colloquially known as Quakers. Its purpose was to educate, quote, colored persons and to train colored teachers, unquote. The school initially provided basic educational services to newly freed slaves and their families. It remained open until 1910, when the public school system began. The Booker T. Washington School, established in 1940, still stands today. It operated for 25 years until the school system was desegregated. It was where black children attended school here during that time. The door to nowhere on the west side of the Eureka Inn was the entryway for African Americans to get to the dining area. I'm glad these things remain so we never forget. Although history plays an important role in understanding Jonesborough, there's actually one thing we're famous for. Jonesborough lays claim to the biggest storytelling festival in the world. It all started in the parking lot under this large mail pouch sign. Built in 1888, this building once housed the last saloon in Jonesborough before it went dry for a period of time. But in 1973, a handful of storytellers performed in front of a handful of listeners, and the very first National Storytelling Festival was born. It's been growing by leaps and bounds ever since. In 2002, the International Storytelling Center was built. The highly acclaimed National Storytelling Festival happens here every October. Although the 2024 festival was canceled due to Hurricane Helene, the town typically sees 10,000 to 15,000 visitors to the event. In addition, storytellers from across America gather to share tales, both big and small, through the Teller in Residence program and the Jonesborough Storytellers Guild Stories and More. The Storytelling Resource Place is located in the historic Slemons House, located in Mill Spring Park. In their own words, the Storytelling Resource Place, SRP, was founded in 2016 to promote the collecting and preserving of resources and artifacts related to the art of storytelling, as well as to establish a physical hub where these resources can be available to storytellers. Storytelling events happen on the porch of the house throughout the warm months, so bring your own folding chair. The historic house is also open to visitors. Now let me just quickly talk about a few other things to do. The Jackson Theater Complex was built in 1921 as a furniture store, which became Jonesborough's first motion picture theater shortly after that. It was originally called the Blue Mouse Theater, and by 1925 it was called the Lyric Theater. Later it was renamed the Jackson Theater after the seventh president, Andrew Jackson. It's just been completely updated inside and out, and will have its grand opening on November 15th through the 17th of 2024. It'll be used for live performances by the Jonesborough Repertory Theater, which is currently housed next door. It'll also provide a live music venue and storytelling venue, and it'll show movies as well. I've never been there, but Wetlands Water Park is located in Jonesborough as well for those so inclined. From their Facebook page, they indicate that their park features 5 water slides, a lazy river, a pool, and much, much more. Presumably, you might get hungry at some point, and if you do, I would recommend any of the following places. The Old Town Pancake House is open 7 days for breakfast and lunch. The restaurant is located in a 1920s bungalow. This is a very good place to eat, but be aware that it's often busy and parking is limited. Do not park at neighboring businesses. The Main Street Cafe building began life in 1931 as the post office, which operated here for almost 3 decades. Later it became a laundromat, and in the 1980s it became the Main Street Cafe. It's open 6 days a week for lunch, but it's closed Sundays. The food is excellent, as is the service. It's an attractive, comfortable place. Texas Burritos and More is open for lunch and dinner 5 days a week. They're closed Sunday and Monday. I haven't eaten there in a while, but the food was good when I did eat there. If none of this appeals to you, there's a nearby restaurant called the Black Olive. It serves pizza and various pasta dishes, sandwiches, and more. The food's really good. You'll want to drive there from the historic downtown area, though. A last recommendation is a Mexican food place called Amigos. It's my wife's favorite restaurant, and I like it too. It's in the same area as the Black Olive, so you'll want to drive there too. If you plan to spend 1 or more nights in Jonesborough, there's a local hotel and lots more within 15 minutes in the Johnson City area. But if you like some unique options, try one of the following. The Eureka Inn was built by Robert Mitchell in 1797 as a private residence. A century later, it was enlarged and converted into the Eureka Hotel. It's been restored and is operational today. The inn looks the way it did 125 years ago. The Reese Hawley Bed and Breakfast is literally the oldest structure that was built in Jonesborough in 1793. It's been added onto, but parts of the original house are still there. The Jonesborough Bed and Breakfast is described as a quiet and comfortable stay in a turn-of-the-century Queen Anne's cottage. The Franklin House Bed and Breakfast has been around since the 1840s at least. I should point out that as a resident, I've never stayed in any of these places, so be sure to do your homework before deciding where to stay. So that's my town. I hope I've given you enough reasons to visit Jonesborough and explore its unique features. You won't be disappointed if you do. I've included a link to my map of Jonesborough in the comments section below. It identifies all of the locations shown and talked about in this video, as well as some information about each one. If you have any questions or comments, post them in the comments section below and I'll respond. Thanks for watching.